All right, we've got another quick little update here. You might see that we have classes items now. This is going to be fleshed out more and might be modified as we go forward. If you look at the master control, you'll find them here. I've added some simple things like short bow, short sword. Basically, I want to get the item system working, get that fleshed out and in a more solid state so I can start working on things like the inventory. So I added that, and in order to play with it, I need a canvas to do that. So I'm going to use this inventory here. Let me show you what we've added. A couple things. We can click that to stop time, and we've got our new profile pictures down here. This is Kyle the robot from Unity. These are different models. I'll show you that in a second, but you can select between them. Now you can also click again to bring down the inventory, and if you have the inventory up, you can do that. You can close the inventory, and of course, if you do bring the inventory up, then time stops, things pause, and you can go through all those, and you can use the keys as well for that. So let me show you how this works. This was something that took me a while to get my head around back in the day, so hopefully you'll understand it faster than I did. So let's start with the profile photos down here. Instead of the image component, we now have a raw image. That's a UI component, and it allows us to use render textures. In our textures here, we have these render textures. The preview down here is showing what it shows. And these are special textures that allow cameras to basically put what the camera sees onto a texture, that named render texture. So up here underneath our canvas section in the control objects, we have player portraits. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 player portraits, and as you can see here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 actual players. Their models are right up here. Each one is a robot, and they're set as a player portrait layer, and that's important because these cameras are only going to show player portrait. The main camera is not going to show player portrait, and in our lighting, our directional light does not show player portrait, and our portrait light only shows player portrait. That's very important. We use the directional light so that we get even light on all 4 players, and we don't have to worry about, like, if they're in a dark dungeon, we'll still see the player, but that directional light won't affect anything else in the scene. So each one of these has the same stuff. We've got the robot, which is the roots part of the robot for animations, and the camera itself. Now, the camera is just positioned right in front of the face to get that close-up angle. And then right here in our target texture, we have our render texture, and that's how the render texture knows to take that. And then in our canvas under player 4, or under our player portrait panel, player 4 has indeed the render texture as the raw image. And yeah, and so now instead of changing the color of the image for showing whether or not the character is selected, we actually change the color of the background right here in the camera. So it starts out as gray, we change it to white when it's selected, and you can change those colors in the script as well. So that's how we do that, and we also have, of course, one more right here, inventory camera, which is a full body one. We did bring the viewport down to half width because for this, let me bring this up. For this, we wanted to show the player on the left here. My goal is to have the player equipped with all the equipment that you bring on. So over here, we're going to have a grid with like a bag where you've got all your items. Rather than having a list of items, I like the idea in the old Might and Magic games where you had a set number of space and each object took up space in that grid system. And if you want to equip a character, you simply drag, say, armor right here, and you drag it over to the armor here, or the armor here, drag it over here. That way you can actually see the player get fully equipped. Off to the sides I will have just boxes for things like the rings or the brooches, things that you don't actually see on the player. But for all the other stuff, the weapons, helmets, boots, cloaks, belts, all the stuff that you do see on the player, you get to see it actually update live. I get really annoyed at the RPGs that just have little boxes for each type with a little arrow going to like the head as a helmet in the box right here. That's just it just bores me. I like being able to see it. Bonus points is that the player portraits down here will also update. So as your player gets cooler gear and whatnot, you'll actually see that updated in the player portraits as well. Since it's a first player game, you really need that connection to the player, to your characters. I think it just helps. I think so. The inventory camera, or our player inventory, we have our player inventory script, and pretty much when we call the in player actions, we just call player inventory load inventory and pass what player we're loading. We could make a public variable, I suppose, that we can call that, but I think we're being fine with just knowing which player is selected. We changed the name to be the name of the player selected. We put the parent the inventory camera, we parent it underneath the player profile of the player selected, and then we change its local position to be what we've set here, 0, 1, 2, which is in front of that player. If the this window is not already open, then we open it, and we have an animator with options here, panel, close, open, hide, left, and right. So the idea is when we have, we're going to eventually, of course, have different panels, a stat panel, options panel, and different panels. So as we cycle through them, we can actually scroll this left and right off the screen. So it just looks prettier rather than just appearing at just a quick little load. So it's pretty simple stuff. It does work on mobile. Of course, having more cameras does take a little bit more processing power. I'm pretty sure it's not that big of a deal because there's not much being rendered in these cameras. It's, I mean, literally just one character with a blank background, so there's no huge depth. The lighting is very simple, just one directional light. So it should be pretty good on most mobile devices, if not all relatively modern devices. So not too much scripting, just a lot of setup here, and that's about it.